So, good morning, I'm Rachel Spacey, and yeah, we're really happy to be here to share our first, it's actually our first ever presentation on our SMaRteN funded Who Cares project. So our team is made up of me and Becky, whose official name is Rebecca, at the University of Lincoln, and we are working with Amy from the University of East Anglia. So we're going to kind of share presenting duties between us, but I know Amy's got quite a bad cold. If you're struggling, Amy, just shout. And before I get into kind of the detail, I just want to say thank you to Amy, who created our project logo, and at some point you'll be able to see it when we look at the slides. So our presentation today is just a kind of introduction to our study. We were funded in the most recent round of the SMaRteN funding for 2021 to 22, and we responded to the key questions funding call to address the question of work and study life balance. So we just want to share a little bit about the background to our study and to our team, what our study looks like in terms of the aims and the key components, the progress we've made so far, and what we're planning to do next.
I think Amy's managed to share it, so thank you so much, Amy.
Thanks,
it was
Amy.
Not allowing me to do that at all for some reason.
Amy, you're the best. So our team is made up of me, Becky and Amy. I'm the PI, and I work as a research fellow in access and participation in the Lincoln Higher Education Research Institute at the University of Lincoln, and I work very closely with Becky. And we've worked together for about 3 years now. And our main role is that we evaluate the University of Lincoln's access and participation plan. So this is our strategy to ensure that underrepresented students at the university access, participate and succeed in higher education. So we're actually academic staff, but we're based in professional services. And luckily, Becky and Amy met through SMaRteN and saw the call for funding, and after some conversations approached me, and we decided that we could all feasibly work together. I probably don't need to say much about Amy, as I'm sure many of you know already, but Amy is a PhD student researcher at the University of East Anglia, and she's now in her final year of study, exploring postgraduate researcher mental health and disclosures. Thanks, Amy. I think it's just really important for us to say that this project's very personal for all of us. So the idea for it emerged from all of our lived experiences as students with caring responsibilities, either in the past or in the present. And all three of us are also studying. So Becky and I study part-time at the University of Lincoln whilst we work, and Amy is a full-time student. And I think we're all very open and honest about how that can and does impact on our own mental health. And all of us are really passionate about undertaking research that improves the experiences of students in terms of not only their mental health, but that kind of student experience. So the focus of much of our work at Lincoln is students who are underrepresented in higher education, and we feel that students with caring responsibilities are another one of those groups. And we are very sort of keen to highlight the ways in which universities can support groups of students from pre-entry right to post-graduation. So at Lincoln, we evaluate interventions and projects that support particular groups of students, and invariably our research with students focuses on mental health in some way anyway. And we're really aware that the needs of some students aren't always understood or supported. And Amy, likewise, has a history of campaigning and advocating for the mental health needs of students throughout her student experience, right from undergrad to postgrad, and making sure that students are at the heart of policy and practice. So I feel like all of three of us kind of came together with these interests and passions, and this call was a real opportunity for us to work together and undertake research with like the potential to really influence policy and practice around the experience of students with caring responsibilities. And we hope that their experience while they study through the kind of findings of this research will help it be a positive one. And I'm going to pass over to Becky now.
Thanks very much, Rachel. So just to talk a little bit more about that funding call. So In 2019 to 2020, SMaRteN had run a priority setting exercise with students. Students were invited to submit what they thought were the key questions that future research into student mental health should address, and hopefully many of you took part in that. So those questions were then grouped into themes, and this final funding call asked researchers to pitch projects according to those themes. So the theme that we chose to address was the theme of work-life balance for students, and for a number of reasons, not least that personal and professional experience that Rachel's just talked about. The student group that we really wanted to work with was student carers and student parents. So these are a really important but quite a neglected group in education research, and in particular we do know that people who care for others, and that might be caring for a child or caring for children, caring for a family member or a friend who has a disability or an addiction or any condition which means that they can't cope on their own without that care. For students in this situation, they have to balance those commitments, and they might face financial challenges because that care is unpaid, but it takes time. So paid employment might be a challenge, and we know a lot of students do rely on paid employment now. They might feel guilty or torn when these responsibilities conflict or compete with each other. And they might find that a university environment is not really built or designed for people like them. But on the other hand, we know that providing care is extremely important. It is a very normal and natural part of our lives as compassionate human beings who live in a social world. So these students bring that really important experience with them, and it's really important that we recognise and we celebrate that. We do want to step away from or avoid using a deficit model in this study. So the aims of the project are to understand more about the wellbeing and student experience of these students, and to find out more about how they balance their commitments, what the challenges are, and how universities can practically support them. Thank you, Amy. So just a little bit about the underlying thinking behind the study. So the philosophy is really participatory and it's quite stakeholder driven. We're a multidisciplinary team, so Rachel and I come more from a sociology of education sort of background, and Amy's coming more from sort of health sciences and psychology background. So we're drawing on all those ideas and all the tools that they give us, and our approach is very much rooted in participatory research traditions. And the reason that we've chosen to work in that way goes back to this idea of respect for the participants' lived experience, respect for their knowledge, and using that to shape the project. So this quote sums up the approach really neatly. Defined most simply, PARS, that's participatory action research, involves researchers and participants working together to examine a problematic situation or action to change it for the better. So this is about building relationships with your stakeholders and working together to solve a practical problem. So it's a mixed methods project, and we'll be using conventional data collection instruments. We're developing a student survey for student parents and carers, and we'll be carrying out interviews with students too. And these are going to explore these areas of work-life balance, well-being, and the student experience, both academic and social. And student co-creation is a very important part of this. Now, although we know this is a trendy term and it's not always really realised as it should be, it's a really key part of embedding this participatory approach through the student co-creation. So there's two primary mechanisms that we're using for that. One is in the overall project governance. So we have a student stakeholders along with other stakeholder groups working together on the project steering committee. And that's a very hands-on committee. They scrutinise the work, they offer direction and constructive criticism, and they shape lots of different aspects of the project materials. And the second mechanism is through working with student researchers to actually carry out some of this work with our support.
I just realised that I needed to take myself off mute to be able to read my slides. Yeah, so just in terms of our progress so far, so we've been working on an annotated bibliography for the project that we're hoping to sort of publish quite quickly, and then a little bit later down the line, looking at more of a sort of systematic review evidence map style paper where we look at some of the biases involved in the research and potentially the more into the definitions and frameworks that we use. We've also recruited for our steering group, and I'm going to talk a bit about the process of that because we think that our experience might be really useful for other people who are thinking of doing, you know, participatory action research or research with sort of the goal of co-creation and really embedding the student voice. So we've been very fortunate to have a range of students with caring responsibilities agree to serve on our steering group, both undergraduate and postgraduate. We also have some academics who may or may not have caring responsibilities themselves, but have a real interest in sort of widening participation work. And then we also have a couple of members of sort of professional services and support staff, so people from student wellbeing and the people that might sort of on a day-to-day basis be interacting with students with caring responsibilities who might present to services seeking support. So we've got, I believe it's about 15 members of our steering group, and it's been a really rewarding experience so far. But I think one of the things that we really wanted to sort of get across is that when you're doing research, so much of what you do can be really guided by language. So in our first meeting of our steering group, we came up with a definition of caring responsibilities and a definition of work-life balance, which sort of on paper seem like quite simple things to define, but actually bringing all of those steering group members together into a room, into a discussion about it, sort of took the full length of the steering group meeting. So on definitions of caring responsibilities, we spoke about, are we explicitly including emotional support as a form of care? Are we acknowledging that a lot of parents, particularly, they may not identify as carers because it's just viewed as sort of, part of their role as a parent? We talked about the cultural factors to consider, because in some cultures, caring is sort of accepted as a responsibility or just something that you do as a role without necessarily being explicitly identified as care work. We also talked about the gendered language of care and ensuring that males who have caring responsibilities can really identify themselves and participate in the research. So our definition of students with caring responsibilities is quite a long one, and we tried to work with the steering group to make it as inclusive as possible. So it includes undergrad, postgrad students of any age, background, etc., who care for a child or children as biological or adoptive parent or foster carer, and or care for or help to care for an adult or child, for example, a sibling, parent, grandparent, friend, who needs help because of their illness, frailty, disability, a mental health problem, or addiction, who cannot cope with their support, which is unpaid, and or supports emotionally or through advocacy to social and or medical services an adult or a child who needs help because of their illness, frailty, disability, a mental health problem, or an addiction, and cannot cope without their support. So you can see how the role of the steering group has been really important, in that what you might think as quite a simple definition of, like, students with caring responsibilities is actually a lot more nuanced than I suppose we as a team originally thought, and it's where the steering group's insights have been absolutely invaluable. And the same in terms of work-life balance. So we discussed with our steering group, sort of the issues of the word work if you're studying. Postgrad students who might consider their studies to be their work, if they're on a stipend, they might identify more as researchers because of that. And what we came up with as a steering group was study, work and life balance, to try and take into account all of those things, because work-life balance is something that I think a lot of people understand, but can mean something very different to a lot of people. So I suppose why I've sort of gone over all of this is just to show the benefit of engaging with, such a diverse group of students, academics and staff in terms of developing our project, but also a lot of the nuances that can be missed, even from the three of us having backgrounds as, having caring responsibilities, you know, the nuances that can be missed and the real importance of that, you know, student-led voice and student-led approach. So our next step is we're meeting with our steering group, I believe at the end of next month, to discuss the measures for our quantitative survey, and we're really looking forward to that because, again, they've given us such brilliant insight into their experiences, potentially areas that we might not have considered, or things that we, because we exist in this sort of, you know, mental health education research policy landscape, take for granted that these definitions are like widely understood. So really looking forward to that, and then launching our first survey, which will then inform the development of interview schedules, where, as we said earlier, we're looking to get student researchers involved in actually, you know, collecting some of that data, and making sure that we're giving our steering group members as many opportunities as possible to be involved throughout every aspect of the project and develop their own skills, as well as giving up their valuable time to share their insights with us.
Thanks, Amy. So thanks, everyone. That was just like a really quick run through of our project, and hopefully at a later date we might be able to come back and share some findings with you. But if you've got any questions or comments, we'd love to hear them. Or if you're interested in following the project, Amy has set up a lovely Twitter account with our logo there. So please follow us on Twitter. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was such an excellent presentation. It's obviously a really important topic, and I love the commitment to co-production throughout. Especially interesting to hear that kind of nuanced and encompassing definition of care and responsibilities that I hadn't properly considered or taken into account. So I found that very interesting, helpful. Thank you very much. We will open up for questions. If anybody has any, you can use the hand up function